Mrs. Wilson didn't know that when she went to the hospital, her house was already occupied by Jenna. She and Wendy rushed to the hospital in a hurry and found Noah and Harold. The father and son were already half mummies wrapped in plaster. Although neither of them is life-threatening, they fractured their limbs, so that they completely lost the ability to move, and could only lie in bed and wail. As soon as Mrs. Wilson entered the door, she was shocked and anxious when she saw the two of them like this. She hurriedly stepped forward and asked, "Noah, Harold, you guys, what's wrong with you?" When Noah and Harold saw the old lady coming, they couldn't control their tears and wept loudly. Especially Harold, crying very sadly. Wendy burst into tears all at once, and asked pitifully, "Dad, brother, how did you become like this?" Harold's eyes were red, and he cried and said, "Grandma. Dad and I were scrapped by Ragnar's people. Grandma, I'm so wrong. I kindly served Ragnar. He was not only not grateful, but also let his people beat me and Dad like this. They are just bastards." Noah also sighed. "Mom, people say that tigers are the only companions to tigers. I understand today. We can't accompany people like Ragnar, so we must keep our distance from him in the future." Mrs. Wilson said eagerly, "What on earth happened? Tell me clearly." Only then did Noah tell what happened. Only then did Mrs. Wilson understand that when they kidnapped Elaine, they also tied up a transnational fraudster. The most annoying thing is that Ragnar, a scheming man, was also deceived by a transnational fraudster. In order to please the other party, he interrupted the limbs of her son and grandson. Hearing this, Mrs. Wilson burst into tears, patting her thighs and howling. "God doesn't have eyes. If you don't trouble Elaine today, that transnational scammer will definitely take Elaine's family. People have broken their homes. But at this time, you just took the initiative to solve the trouble for Elaine, and then caused the trouble to yourself. Today Elaine was supposed to go to hell, but it turned out to be bad. You directly help Interpol and take the fraud. The crime is caught, which is equivalent to helping Elaine completely for free." When Harold heard that the truth was like that, he cried louder and went crazy and said, "I didn't expect that we would end up getting the bastard Elaine for nothing. It's really a big loss. Harold has never suffered such a big loss in his entire life. And it was a big loss that she took the initiative to eat. Wendy, you slapped me twice. I feel so uncomfortable in my heart." Wendy can only persuade, "Brother, since the matter has already happened, don't think about it. The key now is whether your Dad's injuries are not serious and can you recover." Harold choked and said, "Recovery can be made, but it takes a while. The doctor said that we may not have the ability to take care of ourselves for several months. We have to eat, drink and sleep in the bed. We may have to stay in the hospital and have to be accompanied by a caregiver." Ellipsis quote. Mrs. Wilson hurriedly asked, "Harold, where did Mr. Ragnar go?" He was fooled by the scammer, so that he was dismissed. Later, the identity of the scammer was revealed. "Didn't he give you any compensation or give you a statement? Gave a shit?" Noah said angrily from the side. Ragnar, that old dog, was also directly arrested by Interpol. "It is estimated that he will be out of luck," Mrs. Wilson exclaimed. "Ah? Then you two got the meal in vain." Noah naturally knew what the old lady's idea was, and he thought to himself, "What Mom means, she must think that Harold and I were accidentally injured by Ragnar's people, and Ragnar has to make some compensation to make it reasonable. After all, my mother is looking at money." Thinking of this, Noah was a little depressed, and said, "Mom, you have to pay us the hospitalization fee first. Let us transfer to the inpatient department. As for Ragnar, if he comes out in the future, I will ask him for an explanation, okay?" Mrs. Wilson nodded and said, "I'll pay the bill." With that, Mrs. Wilson turned around and left the ward. She stepped to the collection office and said, "I'm here to pay Noah Wilson and Harold Wilson's hospital bill." The other party inquired for a while and said, "The incurred treatment fee is $26,700, and another $80,000 of hospitalization deposit will be needed, which is a total of $10,600,700. Mrs. Wilson couldn't help but feel some pain. Although this $100,000 is not a lot, it is not too small. If this money is not compensated by Ragnar 100 times, I really can't sleep in my dreams. Thinking, Mrs. Wilson still took out a bank card from her wallet and handed it to the other party. "Come on, swipe the card." The other party took the card, swiped it on the POS machine, entered the amount, and said to the old lady, "The password, Mrs." Wilson immediately pressed the password and confirmed, but the POS machine never automatically issued an order. The staff member in charge of the cash register took a look and said, "Your card is frozen, please change one." "What? Frozen?" Mrs. Wilson frowned. "How is it possible? I have tens of millions in my card." At first, after Ragnar helped the Wilson family repay the debt and the bank unsealed the previously sealed property, Mrs. Wilson returned part of her deposit. After that, Ragnar invested in the Wilson family, and Mrs. Wilson also found a way to find some companies that helped people take the account and put the money in her card. Now she has more than 20 million cash in her card, which has always been her pension money left for you. Now, the other party suddenly told her that this card was frozen, and she suddenly became nervous. The other party didn't know if there were tens of millions in her card, and she said impatiently, "I can't control how much money you have in the card, but the POS machine gave me feedback that the card has been frozen. If you have a problem, call the bank, Mrs." Wilson was too shocked, and quickly took out her mobile phone and called the bank. After waiting for a long time for the manual service, she hurriedly asked, "Why did your bank freeze my card? What right do you have to do this?" The other party patiently said, "I'm sorry. It shows that your card is indeed frozen. The reason for the freezing is because your creditor filed a property preservation with the court, FCK your mother." Mrs. Wilson scolded angrily, "I have paid off all my debts a long time ago, how can there be any creditors?" The other party was also a little angry. "Madam, please speak up properly and don't swear. I can see the property preservation execution document. The document shows that your creditor Ragnar Wu initiated property preservation and he helped you repay the amount before. 10 million debts, and tens of millions of funds invested in your company, but now he has to withdraw all the loans and investments, so he has frozen your bank card." "What?" Mrs. Wilson suddenly felt thunderous. Did Ragnar divest? Doesn't it mean that the Wilson family is going back to the previous situation of nothing and in debt?